October 12, 1972. A group of young men boards a chartered military aircraft in Montevideo, Uruguay. Rugby players, university students, ages ranging from late teens to mid-20s. They are going to Santiago, Chile for a match, a trip they have dreamed about for months. They are laughing, joking, excited. 45 people board that aircraft. 16 come home. What happens in between is one of the most extraordinary survival stories in the history of human endurance. This is Flight 571. This is the miracle of the Andes.
Talk to me about the moment that you guys decided as a group that you're going to have to eat your loved ones, your teammates, your friends. What was that like?
I was there, and that's the way I felt. So I thought, this is what I'm going to do. If other people would want to come to me. For me, the big thing was that I couldn't take advantage of my dead friends. But on the other hand, I thought if I would die, I would be proud that my body would be used for someone else.
The Old Christians Club was a rugby team from the Carrasco neighborhood of Montevideo, Uruguay. Mostly young men from Catholic schools, close friends who had grown up together, who had played rugby together since they were boys. In October 1972, the club arranged something special, an exhibition match in Santiago, Chile, against the English Old Boys Club. To get there, they chartered something unusual, a Uruguayan Air Force Fairchild FH-227D turboprop. It was not the most powerful aircraft. Later, survivor Nando Parrado would reflect with disbelief. A Fairchild FH-227D, very underpowered engines, full of people, completely loaded, flying over the highest mountains in South America in bad weather. But in October 1972, nobody was thinking about that. Among the 45 people on board were players, their family members, and friends who had chipped in to help cover the cost of the charter. Nando Parrado was 22 years old, a business student, a rugby player, a young man with everything ahead. He had brought his mother, Eugenia, and his younger sister, Susana, to share the trip, a family adventure. Roberto Canessa was 19, a medical student, strong-willed, intense, and according to Parrado, one of the most determined people he had ever known. There was Gustavo Zabino, also a medical student, Carlos Paez, 18, Roy Harley, Antonio Vicentin, known to everyone as Tintin, and Javier Methol, older than most at 36, traveling with his wife Liliana. The aircraft departed Carrasco International Airport on October 12th, but the Andes had other plans. A storm over the mountains forced the pilot to land early in Mendoza, Argentina, and wait. They spent the night at the Plumarillo Airport Hotel. Young men bored and restless in an Argentine city, playing cards, laughing, impatient to continue. There was one complication. Uruguayan military aircraft were not legally permitted to remain on Argentine soil for more than 24 hours. So the following afternoon, whether conditions were ideal or not, they needed to fly. October 13th, 1972. At 2:18 p.m., the Fairchild lifted off from Mendoza. In the cockpit, Captain Julio Cesar Ferradas, an experienced pilot who had crossed the Andes 29 times. And beside him, Lieutenant Colonel Dante Hector Legarara, the co-pilot, inexperienced, still being trained. The aircraft could not fly high enough to cross directly over the Andes. It was not built to reach 26,000 feet where the highest peaks sat. So the pilots chose a southern route, flying lower through a specific mountain pass called the Pass of Planchon, where the terrain drops just enough for an aircraft like theirs to thread through safely. For a while, everything seemed fine. The rugby players joked in the cabin. Some played cards. Some slept. Some pressed their faces against the windows watching the mountains go by below. Then the cloud closed in. At 3:21 p.m., the pilots began their descent toward what they believed was Santiago. The co-pilot, Legarara, had been watching the navigation equipment and believed he had passed the Curico beacon, the waypoint that signaled it was safe to descend. He was wrong. The Curico beacon passage normally takes 11 minutes after clearing the pass. Legarara began his descent after just one. He was still approximately 80 kilometers inside the Andes, deep in the heart of the mountains, when he started bringing the aircraft down. The aircraft had been flying in cloud. Nobody could see anything outside. In the cabin, some passengers felt turbulence. The rugby players joked at first. The plane was shaking, so what? Then someone looked out the window. The clouds had briefly parted, and a mountain was right there. Right there. Nando Parrado later described that moment. That was probably the moment when the pilots saw the black ridge rising dead ahead. La Gurara saw it too. He pulled back on the controls, applied maximum power, tried to climb, but the aircraft was already going 200 miles an hour in the wrong direction. It was too late. At 3:30 p.m., the Fairchild FH-227D struck the mountain. The remaining fuselage, with everyone still inside it, became a 60-foot metal tube hurtling down the slope of a glacier at terrifying speed, nearly half a mile before slamming into a snowbank at the bottom of the valley. The noise stopped. Snow billowed in through the holes where the wings had been, and then silence. Nando Parrado regained consciousness weeks later and wrote, "I felt the pain in every cell of my body. Clots of dried blood were matted in my hair. 3 bloody wounds formed a jagged triangle about 4 inches above my right ear. I felt rough ridges of broken bone beneath the blood, and when I pressed down lightly, I felt a spongy sense of give. My stomach heaved as I realized what this meant. I was pressing shattered pieces of my skull against the surface of my brain." He had a severe skull fracture. He had been unconscious for 3 days. When he woke, the first thing he asked for was his mother. His friends looked at him. They told him. His mother, Eugenia, had been killed in the crash. His best friend, Francisco Abal, dead. His sister Susana was alive, badly injured, semi-conscious, but alive. She would hold on for 8 more days before she died in Nando's arms. Of the 45 people who boarded that aircraft, 12 were dead before the fuselage stopped moving. 5 more died in the hours that followed. 33 were still alive. They were at 3,570 meters above sea level, 11,710 feet, in one of the most remote valleys in the Andes Mountains. The crash site would later be named the Glacier of Tears. Roberto Canessa and Gustavo Zerbino, both medical students, moved immediately through the wreckage, triaging the wounded, doing what they could with no equipment, no supplies, no training for anything remotely like this. The injuries were catastrophic: broken legs, compound fractures, a piece of metal in Enrique Platero's abdomen. When they pulled it out, a few inches of intestine came with it. He immediately began helping others. The fuselage had split open at the back where the tail had torn away. Cold mountain air poured in. At 3,570 meters, temperatures would drop to -30 Celsius at night. The survivors cleared the passenger seats from the fuselage and packed them against the open rear end as insulation. 28 people crammed into a space designed for passengers sitting in rows, pressed together for warmth, using luggage and debris to seal the gaps. They had food, not much, but the aircraft had been loaded for a trip. 8 chocolate bars, a tin of mussels, 3 small jars of jam, a jar of almonds. Parrado would later describe eating a single chocolate-covered peanut over the course of 3 days. Just one. They were certain rescue was coming. The Chilean Air Search and Rescue Service had been alerted within the hour. 4 aircraft were deployed before dark, then 11 more the next day, from Argentina, Chile, and Uruguay. They searched for 8 days. They flew directly over the crash site. Survivors heard the engines, screamed, waved, tried to write SOS with lipstick on the fuselage roof, used their suitcases to make a giant cross in the snow. But the fuselage was white. The glacier was white. The whole mountain was white. The aircraft passed without seeing them. On day 8, October 21st, the search was officially called off. Authorities had concluded that after 8 days in these conditions, at this altitude, in this cold, without food or shelter, nobody could still be alive. The families of 45 people were told to begin grieving. The 33 survivors who were still alive found out from a transistor radio that one of them had found and managed to repair. It could only receive, it could not transmit. but it received enough. Roy Harley sat inside the cold fuselage, headset on, and heard the news that the search had been abandoned, that they were presumed dead. He told the others. Some wept, some clasped their hands and prayed, some stared at nothing. Roberto Canessa later described that moment. I felt that the world was going on its way and that we were out of the world. It's a very strange sensation to be alive while you were considered dead. But it also resettled us. Waiting for rescue was over. If we didn't get ourselves out, we were all going to die. Nando Parrado did not react much. He was already planning. By day 9, the food was almost gone. They had tried eating the leather from the seatbelts, the cotton stuffing from the seat cushions. It made them sick. The mountains around the crash site were 3,500 meters of bare rock and permanent snow. No animals, no plants, nothing alive. Nothing except the 33 survivors and the bodies of the dead, preserved perfectly in the snow around them. Roberto Canessa was the first to say it aloud. He had been thinking about it for days, running the numbers as a medical student would, the human body as fuel, the calories required to survive, the mathematics of starvation at altitude. He told the group, he said, "This is my idea. I'm going to go out there and cut off a piece. I respect what other people think, but there is no plan B." The reaction in the fuselage was silence, then grief, then horror, then the long, terrible logic of survival working its way through 33 minds, one by one. They had been raised Catholic, almost all of them. The taboo was the deepest possible kind. These were their friends, their teammates, their family members. Canessa framed it theologically. He argued that their friends, who had believed in God and in love, would have wanted them to live. That using their bodies was an act of love, not desecration. That God would not punish men for surviving. It took days before most of them could do it. Canessa used a piece of glass from the shattered cockpit windscreen as a knife. His description: "What we did 9 days after the accident, the first cut will never be forgotten. We took the meat we cut and placed it on sheet metal. Everyone held on until their last strength, and when we were exhausted, we started eating. We all made this decision individually, and once we did, there was no turning back. This was our farewell to innocence." They made a pact, every one of them. "If I die, use my body, so that at least you can get out of here, and tell my family how much I love them." Parrado described it later with a clarity that has never left people who have heard it. You can't feel guilty for doing something you didn't choose to do. We were dead men walking, but we were still walking. Day 17, October 29th, 1972. They had survived the crash. They had survived starvation. They had survived the cold. They were sleeping inside the fuselage, packed together for warmth, when they heard it. A sound like the mountain itself deciding to move. An avalanche. It hit the fuselage at speed, burying it completely under meters of snow. In seconds, the interior went from dark to black. Packed snow filled every gap. Nobody could stand, nobody could see, nobody could breathe properly. Of the 27 survivors inside the fuselage, 8 died, buried by the snow, suffocated. The remaining 19 were entombed, trapped between the snow and the bulkhead, in a space that would comfortably have held 4. Nando Parrado punched a cargo pole through the roof to create an air hole. They breathed through it. They stayed like that for 4 days. On the 4th day, they dug their way out. 19 survivors, down from 33, down from 45, and the mountain had more winter coming. November passed. They were not waiting for rescue anymore. They had accepted that no rescue was coming. The question was no longer whether to try to get out. The question was how. An early expedition had found the tail section of the aircraft, which had torn off completely during the crash, and slid down the mountain to a separate location. Inside it, more food, medicine, batteries, and the cockpit radio. Roy Harley, who had electronics knowledge, spent days trying to connect the batteries to the radio. It didn't work. They had no means to call for help. They had one option left: walk out. The co-pilot had died repeating in his final confused breaths that they had passed Curico, that Chile was to the west, that if they walked west, they would find people. But to walk west meant first climbing the mountain that rose above their crash site, a mountain Parrado would later name Mount Celer after his father. It stood at 4,650 meters, 15,260 feet, with no mountaineering equipment, no experience, no map, no compass. 3 of the strongest survivors were chosen as expeditionaries: Nando Parrado, Roberto Canessa, and Antonio Vicentin, Tintin. They spent weeks preparing. The others sewed pieces of insulation from the aircraft's lining into a sleeping bag big enough for 3 people, stitched with needles by a young man named Carlos Miguel Rodriguez, who remembered that his mother had taught him to sew. They dried meat from the dead to carry as food. On December 12th, 61 days after the crash, the 3 men set out. They climbed, without ropes, without crampons, using a metal bar they had salvaged from the wreckage to carve steps into the ice, one at a time. Parrado wrote, "With every step that you go up, you slide back half a step. You are like a child, confronted by a snowstorm, trying to go straight up, using your hands and your feet, slipping and sliding. At altitude, the air is thin. Every step requires 3 times the effort. Every breath brings a fraction of the oxygen a breath at sea level would." They slept in their makeshift sleeping bag, all 3 pressed together in the below-zero darkness, and started again at dawn. On the 3rd day, Parrado reached the summit of the mountain, and he looked west, and he saw not the green valleys of Chile that the co-pilot had promised, not the fields, not the roads, not the towns, but mountains. Mountains in every direction, snow-covered peaks as far as the eye could see. Roberto Canessa later described that moment. "I couldn't breathe. I couldn't speak. I couldn't even think, because what we saw was horrible. Instead of green valleys, we saw mountains, snow-covered peaks 360 degrees around us." Canessa thought, "We're dead." Parrado looked at him and said something that has never left the people who later heard him say it. "We may be walking to our deaths, but I would rather walk to meet my death than wait for it to come to me." They decided that Vicentin should return to the fuselage. The food was running out, and 2 people needed less than 3. He used an aircraft seat as a makeshift sled and descended in an hour what had taken them 3 days to climb. Parrado and Canessa kept going west. They walked for 6 more days after Tintin turned back. Downhill now, mostly, following valleys, following water. Their bodies were wasting. Roberto Canessa had lost half his body weight. He weighed 44 kilograms, 97 pounds. On December 20th, day 69 on the mountain, they were settling by a river for the night when they saw something on the opposite bank. 3 men on horseback. They had not seen another human being since the aircraft crashed 72 days earlier. They screamed, waved their arms. The river was too loud. Their voices were too weak. But one of the horsemen, a Chilean cattle herder named Sergio Catalan, saw them. He held up a hand, pointed at them, shouted one word, "Tomorrow," then rode away. That night, Parrado and Canessa lay beside the river, not knowing if the man would come back, not knowing if he had understood, not knowing if, after 69 days of everything, this was one more hope that would not come. The next morning, Sergio Catalan came back. He had brought paper and a pencil. He tied them to a stone and threw them across the river. Parrado sat by that river and for the first time in 70 days had a means to speak to the world. He wrote, "I come from a plane that crashed in the mountains. I am Uruguayan. We have been walking for about 10 days. 14 others remain at the crash site. They are injured. They have no food and cannot move. We cannot walk any further. Please come and get us." Catalan read the note. He looked across the river. Then he rode. 75 miles on horseback to the nearest town. 10 hours of riding. To tell the world that there were survivors of a crash everyone believed had killed everyone 70 days ago. The news broke like a thunderclap. In Uruguay, in Chile, in Argentina, families who had been told their sons were dead were now hearing something impossible. They were alive. some of them. On December 22, 1972, 72 days after the Fairchild FH-227D struck the mountain above the Glacier of Tears, Chilean Air Force helicopters reached the crash site. The scene they found was beyond anything the rescuers had prepared for. The broken white fuselage, the snow around it stained with the evidence of everything those 19 people had done to survive. And the survivors themselves, gaunt, hollow-eyed, grey-skinned, some unable to walk, but alive. 8 survivors were airlifted out that day. High winds prevented the helicopters returning until the following morning. On December 23rd, the remaining 8 survivors came home. And then the world asked questions. How had they survived? What had they eaten? When the truth emerged, it landed like a second shock. There was condemnation from some, questions of morality and religion that thundered from pulpits and newspaper front pages. The survivors faced them directly. They held a press conference. Roberto Canessa said, "It's a very, very humiliating thing to eat a dead body, but when you kill someone, you become a cannibal. We didn't kill anyone. We made a decision to live. We thought of our mothers. We thought of our families. And we ate so that we could go home to them." The Catholic Church ultimately did not condemn them. The Archbishop of Montevideo declared that they had acted within the limits of Christian ethics, that survival under such circumstances was a valid moral choice. Parrado spent 26 years not speaking publicly about the Andes. When he finally did, he said something that has been quoted around the world ever since. "I think it was the effort of a group of young people who trusted each other beyond anything that you can imagine. And the result is that we are alive." The 29 who did not come home are buried at the crash site. Most of them, at their family's request, remain on the mountain, at the base of the Glacier of Tears, in the place where they died. The crash site of Flight 571 still exists in the Andes today. The remains of the fuselage are there, buried under decades of glacial movement, slowly being absorbed by the mountain. A simple iron cross stands on the slope above, placed there by the survivors themselves, with the names of the 29 who never came home. Nando Parrado became a television producer, a businessman, a racing driver, and a motivational speaker. He has a wife, 2 daughters, and 4 grandchildren. He says that what happened in the Andes is not the defining event of his life. The life he built after it is. Roberto Canessa became a pediatric cardiologist. He has spent his life since saving children's hearts. The 2023 Netflix film Society of the Snow was nominated for multiple Academy Awards. Several of the actual survivors had cameo roles in it. This story is not about cannibalism. It is not about the crash. It is not even about the rescue. It is about what human beings choose when everything has been taken from them, and the only thing left is each other. Nando Parrado said it best. "We are dead men walking, but we are still walking."